Let your hair down. Don't say too many words.
I'd like to call the May 20th PTSA board meeting to order at 9 o'clock. And with that, make sure everybody silences their phones. There's a board meeting a couple of weeks ago where it was like a space. So anyway, let's silence phones. And with that, Rochelle, roll call, please.
Sure. We've got Director Clement,
Here.
Director Wilkins,
Present.
Director Hansford, and President Wilson.
Here. And please join me with the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, we'll move on to public comments. If there's anybody here that would like to speak, please limit your talk to 5 minutes. And does anybody wish to make a public comment? And none in the room, anybody online? Okay. And Rochelle, did we receive any written?
We did not.
Okay, thank you. And now let's move on to review and adopt the agenda. Do any directors wish to adjust or remove any items on the agenda for adoption and approval? Seeing none, given the approval. Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
And with that, all in favor, say aye, or do we have to do a? Yeah, he's.
No roll call since
No.
Dale's not here.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Thank you. Aye.
Thank you.
And now going on to one of the really important parts of the meeting. In case you haven't gotten them, there's 10-year anniversary croissants and donuts over here. And with that, I believe, Vicki, you have the podium, please.
Good morning, President Wilson and Directors, speaking from Human Resources Administrator. As we do on a monthly basis, I'm here to congratulate some staff on their achievements. And I will start with, I got a little ahead of myself on this one, but I will start with Anthony Salinas. He has passed his mechanical technologist grade 4, grade 3 certification, and he will be receiving a promotion to maintenance mechanic 3 in the very near future. So congratulations on that, Anthony. Happen to know that Anthony worked on that for a really, really long time. So I know there was some really good effort in that. And then wanted to acknowledge 3 work anniversaries. The first one will be Jason Hayes with 5 years of service here at PTSA. Good job, Jason. And then 2 10-year anniversaries, and that would be again Anthony Salinas, 10 years. Chavez with 10 years. Good job, everyone.
I just would like to say something. The 3 people that had anniversaries, I cannot think of 3 people that exemplify what we should be doing. Anthony, 10 years being here and to continue to progress like you're doing. Congratulations on that. That's terrific. Rochelle, we could not do this board meeting without you. And every time I'm here, I just really appreciate more. And Jason, 5 years, it's been a really dull 5 years. So. Well, anyway, thank you all very much. Much appreciated. And with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And was any director like to pull any items from the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll move on to the regular agenda. And Vicky, I believe you're backed up with the cost of living adjustment salary schedule.
I am indeed, and thank you again, President Wilson. So annually, at this time of year, we bring forth the request for a COLA increase. At the conclusion of our recent class and comp study, we approved Resolution 3-2025, which included amended language for the COLA. That stated that we would bring forth a request for 100% of anything under 4%, and anything over 4% will be determined by the Board of Directors. Based on the California CPI All Urban Index, February 2025 to February 2026, the CPI is 2.9%. And the request today is for a 2.9% COLA increase to be effective July 12th, 2026. So we recommend approval of a 2.9% COLA and amended salary schedule, which includes year 2 implementation of the class comp study, as well as this COLA. And I have given a slightly amended version of the salary schedule to the board clerk. It just includes a little bit of language at the very bottom of the salary schedule that is a signature line. So it doesn't change the actual salary schedule that I have presented in the board packet. So again, we recommend that approval.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
I move approval of the staff recommendation. So.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And now we're starting to get into some interesting, not all interesting, but Jason, I believe you're up with the strategic plan.
I'll go ahead, I'm up here, with the presentation. Again, as the board is aware, we asked for approval of the proposal to undergo a strategic planning effort in December of last year. The board approved that. And we moved forward with Trippi Smith in developing a strategic plan. We participated in a workshop with myself and the facilitator. We came up with some broad goals and some recommendations for how to move forward. We then met with the executive staff of TTSA and we developed what we're calling the work plan. Today I'll be presenting some of the highlights from that. In the packet, we have the completed plan. I will just make sure that, it is a known concept that this will be a living document. It's going to change. It's going to, maybe some of our timelines were a bit aggressive. Maybe some of our timelines were a bit not aggressive enough. So we're probably going to come back to the board on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis with an update on progress on the strategic plan and any changes that have been made to timelines. The development of when and how and who was going to do these objectives was done in a room where we were all kind of saying, yeah, sure, that sounds like a reasonable time for me to get that done. We'll see when we're actually living it. Whether it was a reasonable thing to sign ourselves up for. So the plan that I've attached in the packet has a little bit more detail, but I'll just kind of go over the broad goals and provide some of the objectives that we've developed. So go ahead. So goal number one is to deliver and execute the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. I really appreciated the board's input on that not only being one of the goals, but that being goal number one. We're looking at that as not just a order list number, that is a priority. So we're taking that message loud and clear. So the objectives from that is to confirm and maintain project governance structure. That's been something that's very important. Monitor, manage the schedule. That's going to be things, I'll get a little bit more specific on how we plan on developing those things. Cost controls. We're going to have some really clear metrics on establishing cost control for the project. And then we're going to develop and provide the board with a regular update system that gives kind of insights into discussions that have happened during workshops, decisions that have been made, and decision points. So our tactical steps, which are the work plan items. So we're gonna have a bit of a decision log that we're gonna provide to the board on a regular basis. There will be a report tucked into all of the board reports that we can provide a brief verbal update, but if the board is interested, you can kind of dig into that a little bit more. So anytime we make a decision on a project related, financial related, there'll be a decision point in there with a brief explanation if this was some of the logic that kind of behind it. So if it's something that rises to a level of representing a clear or a substantial cost increase or change, then we can have a little bit more of a discussion and open forum during the board meeting and say, well, what was the logic behind that? So we're gonna be using some of the invoicing information that Corolla already provides us. Hopefully that's a minimal amount of effort, but a lot of payout. We're going to be providing a quarterly update on the major design decisions, the major design points. So a little bit more of a thorough breakdown with more of a presentation, probably with some participation from the consultant. So a little bit more detail involved there. For cost control change, we're going to create a work chart and a project path that shows some of the criteria that we used to make decisions on spending. One of the things that we kind of find ourselves in is, if you only have $1 million here, it translates into this savings in the long term, right? Well, we have to find a way to articulate that in a way that actually makes sense. We don't have versus spend whatever we want on this project. So we're gonna have a bit of an advisory committee, internal with potential for inclusion of a board member if there is interest, where we can spend, a concerted effort sitting down, discussing some of these decision points and kind of, I don't want to use the forbidden term value engineering, but there is going to be some value engineering involved where we make decisions about whether or not that was wise spending. And we're going to, as part of this whole thing, providing the briefings to the board, we're gonna provide a general manager member agency outreach program. We're already kind of tentatively doing that, but we're going to formalize that, get it on a calendar so that the board is able to kind of see what is the initial and what is the ongoing approach to making sure that all the member agencies are well informed about the project. On goal 2, so we're the long-term financial sustainability and affordability. So again, we are going to reinforce and align the agency's multi-year financial planning with capital priorities, reserve policies. This is something that's already sort of starting to happen. Liz has done tremendous amount of work in the last couple of years on kind of getting this initiated. We're going to formalize it. We're going to put some deadlines to ourselves to ensure that we know that we have expectations for ourselves. We're gonna, the reserve policy refreshes being built into our policy are kind of those types of things are going to ensure that it all stays fresh, that it all stays relevant, that we're not missing opportunities or investments or whatever. And we're going to develop rate setting policies. We're going to develop some potential financial information systems. I really am hopeful for that because we are approaching some of the constraints of our existing financial system. So we're looking already at the beginning of the FY kind of potentially exploring that. We're going to be, the objective B is applying capital prioritization criteria. So we're going to continue to modify that CIP document that the board has seen. And that we're going to include things like create a matrix for the priority of the projects. That's something that we kind of internally know, but I think it would be a useful tool within the document to have an explanation for the, a little bit of risk management associated. We're elevating the priority of a project because it represents a tremendous risk to operations or vice versa. We're going to evaluate a condition assessment, potentially something a little bit more formal than what we've done in the past. And we're going to apply some cost control oversight. And we're going to include that on the CIP. And then C, I believe, we're going to evaluate the line funding strategies. This is a big one for long-term stability, including pursuing external funding. So we're already working on a work plan with this. We've got Rollo helping us extensively. But we want to have a bit more of a formalized plan as I go out and I discuss these things with stakeholders, and we have community outreach meetings and stuff. I want to have a little bit more of a formalized plan that this is, again, acknowledging that it is a fluid plan that as opportunities present themselves or become less interesting, then we can kind of adapt. And then, we want to have a little bit more of a formalized look at the cost effectiveness and the risk of land sales. We've had a lot of discussions about that. We're going to do a bit more of a formal breakdown for ourselves, and we're going to identify, is this something that validates putting some effort into and getting it done, or is it something that represents more of a risk? So that's my key project. So more to come on that. You'll get plenty of updates on that. So goal number 3, provide a clear, purpose-driven communication and transparency. So under objective A, develop and communicate a consistent, accessible explanation of TTSA's mission. This is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart because it's amazing the number of people you talk to in the community that don't really know what we do. And it's always exciting when you see someone, you explain what we do and they go, oh, there's a bit of a light bulb moment and they go, that's really cool. I have yet to find anyone that said, oh, that's kind of boring. You know, most people are like, wow, that's really interesting. I had no idea that was even going on. So we're going to develop a little bit more of a formal system for kind of providing that information. It's going to tie in with the existing strategy for the outreach that I mentioned last board meeting that we are initiating. So we're going to have a SharePoint site or a website, you know, with a little bit more, you know, consistency on that. We're going to establish departmental strategic plans. So I'm having expectations for each of the managers that they will in turn create a strategic plan within their own departments that feeds to this one. And eventually this is going to be a really big development point for future budgets. We want to make sure that we are very serious about the strategic goals and that we demonstrate that by showing that the budget supports them. And then we're going to develop some outreach policies and procedures. We've managed to this point, you know, I think at the last board meeting, Director Wilkins, you mentioned that it's nice to have a little bit more of someone that's their responsibilities to work on these things, and we've kind of filled in where we need to. So we're going to develop a little bit of a training program for people so that everyone has a consistent level of messaging, those that are participating in the outreach programs, and we're going to structure them. So we'll get that to you guys. I think that's like a 2027 structure thing. So, and again, a lot of these things we made decisions when they will be due, but we'll have to kind of, I think that some of these things are going to be done soon. So for goal B, for objective B, establish predictable and purposeful communication on major financial decisions. So we're going to more formalize that, publish a schedule of the public outreach opportunities. We're quickly filling the schedule right now. I'm pending some approvals. I think I'm already scheduled for 3 in July.
July and then the 1st of August.
July into August. So I think we're heading back out to North Tahoe. I believe Olympic Valley also, and then we'll be at Good Morning.
Good Morning Truckee.
And then we're also trying to put together one for a discussion with the Rotary Club, and that would be kind of a joint effort with the TSD. So we're trying to kind of work cohesively with what we've been given. And then again, we're looking for every opportunity we can to continue to leverage the relationships with the member agencies. I think that's going to be key. I'll mention it in the report later in the meeting, but I did have a really productive meeting with the member agency executives, and everyone was really excited about the project. I was able to kind of give them a little bit more of the wonky, in-depth, you know, this is what's going on with the project. Everyone was very excited. So it seemed like it was a very positive. In objective C, provide purposeful and clear and timely communication, education. So we're going to have a pretty formalized list of stakeholders that we kind of reach out to on a regular basis, provide, we're hoping like a newsletter kind of a thing, so that we're getting consistent information out on a regular basis. And then the objective D, coordinate messaging with various stakeholders. So again, we're gonna work really hard to develop some improved talking points. I've gotten some feedback from a couple of board members that it would be nice to have a little bit of a fact sheet or an FAQ sheet that would be kind of a quick, yeah, sure, I know about, this, and we have a little bit of the talking points. And actually, we've gotten communication from leadership from the other member agencies. They would like those as well, so that a phone call, or if they get a question, their board meetings or a public outing. They have some kind of- So that's going to be something developed relatively quickly.
Jason, real quick, before you move on to goal 4.
Yep.
I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read the most recent training article. It was exactly what we're looking for. I mean, it came across as we're not moving forward on this big project, the $310 million plan project, without a lot of thought, without a lot of study, without a lot of facts in front of us. And also, most importantly, without a lot of input from the people, the stakeholders. And I kind of look at that as being kind of one of the cornerstones of how we proceed going forward. So hats off to that. If you haven't read that article, it's definitely.
Yeah, we're gonna go make sure we get a print version of it for someone's time capsule.
It's a secret.
Okay, goal 4 is the strength and organization and workforce readiness. This is another one that is nice to have a little bit more articulation to it, because it's one of those things that can be kind of nebulous and, oh yeah, sure, workforce is super important. We're gonna do some really specific things to try and align staff with where we're going and to provide them with a lot of the tools they need for kind of an unknowable future at this point. So the objective A is to align the organizational structure with the operational model. So we do have some level of clarity at this stage that we know that the staffing and the technical knowledge of the staff are going to be different for the new facility. We don't want to be caught flat-footed, handed a facility that's ready to go with the wrong staffing. So we're going to develop a transition plan that it's going to be working on some ideals, and it's going to be operating with some assumptions, but we want to make sure we have a plan for how we intend to accommodate the new facility. Objective B is to develop and implement a workforce readiness plan, prepare staff and new technologies. So one of the things that has come up several times is the training and conferences budget, as we talk about that. And it's easy to say we're going to do all these things. It's much more difficult to actually do them, turns out. We want to make sure that we have a really, really rigorous plan for how we're going to ensure that the staff have already talked to the industry folks that are doing this stuff already, that they're already in communications with the manufacturers, with the consultants, with all those that are going to be involved with actually building this facility and those that are running it currently. So we want to get that exposure out there. So we're going to develop a really, really specific roadmap. We're going to do some employee surveys to kind of identify where the staff believe they can benefit. We're going to leverage all of the same things with a little bit more targeted approach. So CWVA, we're going to identify NACWA and CSTA, and there's a lot of these different organizations in the area, in the state, that we can utilize, and maybe even kind of go a little bit out of the traditional routes and send some folks to some stuff too. And leadership training is going to be a big part of this, because I'm a very, very big advocate of supervisory training and making sure that that's like the strongest portion of the workforce. So objective C is going to be reinforcing performance and accountability and professional expectations to some culture of responsibility. There, that word culture, very, very important. Something that the staff are really invested in. They really want this to be a fantastic place to work. I'm behind that. Let's do it. And I really, I think that everyone likes the notion of us upping our game. And basically, no one's going anywhere. No one's, we're talking about people that are here getting better training to understand some of these more difficult concepts that are coming down the road. And I think that it's very exciting for a lot of people to imagine getting this more advanced training. So we're going to have a consistent plan for making that happen. Accountability starts at the top. So We're going to formalize the general manager evaluation program. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It's probably a very organic thing and it's very specific to the board of directors that does it. So there will be a lot of involvement from the board of directors as we develop it. But I would like to have something that allows the board to know that they have the valves and the checks and measures to put, the pressure on me where it needs to happen, so that we achieve these things, so that we actually move forward. And I want the staff to know that, yes, we're holding everyone accountable, but I'm being held accountable as well. So I think that's really important. And of course, as part of this, we're going to look into some, there's financial awards that we can apply for excellence. There's some treatment awards we can apply for excellence. We want to get a little bit more into that sphere. We don't want to get lost in that. We don't want it to turn into like someone's half of their jobs to go pursue awards, but we definitely want to keep that on the horizon. We want to make sure we acknowledge that those are nice kudos for the staff to recognize that they did the work necessary to achieve that. This one's a challenge, but I am committed to it, is strengthening succession planning in leadership. I think right now we're in an amazing position. I was able to leave for 10 days out of communication and everything ran perfectly. Thank you so much to the leadership team. Thank you so much to everyone that participated in making that possible. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that, but it's just very reassuring to know from a succession perspective that I could go missing in the mountains and the plant would still continue to run. They've got it. I have every confidence. And so that's nice to know. And I think that, it's one of those things that's really difficult to firm up, but I know I've got a team that can do that. Now they know that they have a team under them that can do the same, vice versa, all the way down to the lowest levels. And that's a tremendous strength. So we're going to kind of assess any kind of mentorship programs potentially. It's tough in a small organization, but I think it's useful. I think that sometimes people, they see, a management position, or they see a technical position, or they see a supervisory position, and they don't really know what that position entails. They don't know what they do. I think it'd be great to have an opportunity to, do a follow along for a couple of days or something like that. And I'm already working on having aspiring leadership. There's a lot of folks at the agency that have aspirations to be a leader. And I think that, having a little bit of education for that gives them, and some people find out some things about leadership and they go, maybe that's not for me. Some people go, wow, that is perfect. So we're going to do more to develop that. And then on goal 5, protect long-term infrastructure reliability and resilience. I feel like this goal came a lot from the concept that we're in a situation where the plant's 50 years old, and I don't want it to sound like I believe the people from the past made mistakes and screwed up or anything like that. But we're in a position right now where, we're kind of stuck with a tremendous amount of rehab work or a wholesale replacement. And, ultimately the wholesale replacement for the most part made the most sense. It would be good that the people 50 years from now have a whole Rolodex of choices on how they would plan to continue to address resilience. That we really want to prepare the future generations so that they don't have to do the same thing, so that we don't have to rinse, repeat, recycle on this. One of the concepts that I think is really important to hit home is the 1970s, the federal government, the EPA, state government, in our case, Port of Cologne, they created the Clean Water Act, and it was a mad scramble. There were infrastructure, massive amounts of money was spent. Federal government had to assist, and it was a major change in perspective of how wastewater was handled, how receiving water was viewed, all those things. And it's been 50 years since that time, and now we're doing the Clean Water Revitalization Project because it's kind of a refresh of that. I think there was some it was a major, wow, we did this was amazing. And then 50 years go by and maybe as a country, we didn't do a tremendous amount in that time. So here we are, refreshing, we're doing all this, but we want the future generation to not have to make this decision. So we're looking at the re-implementation of our asset management software potentially. We're currently assessing it. Asset management software gives you the ability to determine the value of repairs. It it allows you to say, it's that basically, you've got a car with a bad transmission. You look up the Kelly Blue Book, wow, it's only worth $1,000. I'm not gonna spend $6,000 changing the transmission, right? It allows you to do some of that math on a larger scale for the entire facility. We have a lot of stuff in this facility that proudly and thankfully lasted really longer than it might have originally anticipated it was gonna last. But we don't want to rest on those laurels. We don't want to assume all of the stuff we're going to get for the clean water project are gonna last for, an additional 70, 50, 60 years, whatever. So we're gonna do that. And then one of the key things is a better integration between asset management and our financial system. That's going to play into the earlier objective where we're going to look at a new financial information system. The financial information system we have right now it's a relatively lightweight program. It does not and would not integrate well with other things. So having a little bit more integration between those two concepts allows us the opportunity to forecast some of these replacement costs a little better, look at valuation of things a little bit more clearly, and to identify whether something's replaced or not. So that's our goals and our objectives. It's a lot. So having said that, we recognize that this is going to be a pretty substantial amount of our effort over the next year and a half to 2 years. I will continue to update the board as we have more information and we're more formalized, and we'll give updates on the progress for all these things on a regular basis. Staff is recommending the acceptance of the strategic plan in this case. We will file it and we'll go on the website.
Do we have any public comment? Any questions from the board on this?
Heavy lift. I like it. It may be a lot more than you think it is.
It might be.
My one commentary is you have 4 people carrying 95% of the weight. That doesn't sound right to me.
Sure.
And I think they don't have to be the technical expert in every area, but getting more executive team members assigned on to the tasks would probably be helpful for you, but also would be helpful for them.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it. And if you had to put like the name of one person at the top of each goal, not just in the components, then you also have an owner and a driver for that entire goal that you can keep on task as necessary.
Yeah.
But those would be my primary comments. It's gonna be a lot of work.
Yes.
But yeah, great work so far. Just don't kill the horses that ride the hardest all the time.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
And we did have a brief discussion about this, and it's semantics, but we've kind of communicated to each other. Just because your name is on here doesn't mean you're responsible for doing all of the work to get it done. You're just responsible for ensuring that it's getting done.
Yes. Spread the risk.
But your point is well received, yes.
I think, Bert, what I'm hearing from you is clearly it's big, right? But going back to succession planning and development, this is a huge opportunity for people to get their feet wet in like leadership and what the reality of it is. So I think they were great comments.
Yeah, I had a couple. I think probably the overarching one for me was there's a few places where, although I'm all for brevity, I would like a little bit more meat on the bones. So there was a couple of spots like, was it like right transition or something? I'm like, well, but it doesn't really explain what you mean by that. And there were a couple of other places where I felt like that is to have a C above doesn't, in that first goal, there's one box that says C above. To me, that's not really meeting what we're trying to do with this. So that was one thing. And otherwise that just, the lettering, now this sounds really, really petty, but having been in the room when we were trying to do these, right? And that's attached at the back. I was trying to kind of follow what we had decided on in that room that day with what you had in the objectives here. And I was trying to follow the letters and that doesn't quite work. And so I know it sounds really petty, but maybe you could go to numbers there just to help out with that, because I think, I know I was having a hard time with that. Really small thing like, 1C, it should be create and implement a change order management system. It doesn't say the word order. I know it's really small. And then, yeah, I just felt, I know you're gonna, this is the document we're gonna keep seeing. I said maybe every 3 months, maybe 6 months, but I would like a little bit more meat on the bones. I felt like in a few places we could have used a little bit more explanation. I think certainly for some public trying to read it, they wouldn't be able to follow along with all of it. And then one thing I would like to add for the goal 2, which is financial, and we may already have it, so it may not need to be added. If we don't already have a process and procedures policy on adopting rates and how we go about the Prop 218 procedure, if we don't have one of those, we need one of those because we're about to do a rate study. So I would like to see that in here.
You got it. We don't have one currently to answer the question.
Alexis, did you catch some of that?
Yes, I'm catching all this.
All right, perfect, thank you.
So question, Catherine, so in terms of the process and procedure for Prop 218 for policy around it, what are you thinking there? 'Cause I mean, I know when we've done rate setting in the past, we followed the 218, we
Yeah.
hire the consultant,
Yeah.
do the study, there'll be a couple check-ins with the board as the study is being conducted, and then once we're ready for that to go out to the public, we'll run it through the legal process that we need to.
Yeah.
So what is it you're thinking?
So
of-
the problem with 218 is that it's in one of the articles and it gives you a broad process, but it doesn't define how you do parts of it. Like, what exactly do you specify in your Prop 218 notice? How exactly do you campaign your protests? So these are procedural efforts that will guide the agency. And can become very important because there's a huge gray legal area there with the 218 process. And we can set our own policy on portions of that and how we're going to go about doing it. So I think it's extremely important that we do that.
It's basically adding detail and clarity to certain areas that are big.
Yes,
in the
it's
Prop 218
very,
process.
very, very vague in some areas. So, yes.
I wonder if that's something that Josh has with other agencies, or if you have in your professional career that we can copy.
I have, but I'm sure Josh has too.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's definite templates we can copy.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be that hard for us to do this,
Got it.
but we wanna have it in place before we go out and, well, by the time we've completed the rate study and we are actually making a decision and putting those notices out to people, we wanna have our policies, procedures in place.
And I think that also helps because one of the fundamentals there is transparency. So if we have that in place and we show that we followed that, just adds to the clarity and the transparency.
It will.
Yeah. Great preference. So do we want to bring this back with another version? How do we want to proceed on this?
I would quite like another version, but I don't need it immediately.
Okay.
I think I would like a bit more meat on the bones before you put it anywhere that's in a public treatable place. Because like I said, I just think a little bit of it is not quite clear enough to people exactly what you're trying to do. The objectives I think are very good. It's in the work plan itself where I just feel it's just needs a little bit more.
Not a big deal. We can definitely provide more specificity and more clarity. We'll be working some drawings as well.
And I think that was partly the purpose of this agenda item, right? To get this in front of the board, to see comment, either if we're good with it, adopt it, or see comment to tune it up and bring it back to us at a subsequent meeting.
Could be you go through the first phase of the goals and objectives and then fine tune based on the actual in
Yeah,
work
yeah, right.
aspects instead of something not being clear today and guessing.
Yeah, and
Really
again,
guessing, but you know,
I think some of the vagueness, in a couple of the items at least, is we recognize the end product that we want, but we don't yet completely understand what process is going to get to that end product. So we maybe out of ignorance left it vague, but there are definitely instances where we know.
Yeah, and I think I could give you one example. I just jotted it down there for the evening. So goal 4A. That first objective there, it says develop a transition plan. But when you said it to us, you said it really well.
Yeah,
Okay, so I just added to prepare staff for the new plan of operation. Okay, it's as simple as that, just adding a few words, like, what do you mean by a transition plan? That's it.
that's good feedback. Thank you.
We have a consensus that,
We
we
just bring it back.
some work to do and then bring it back and.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I don't have any more comments on the content. Maybe when you bring it back, you could give us your thoughts on what you think would be a reasonable. Yeah, I'm thinking of a kind of a check-in on the status of the progress of the plan implementation.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned periodic, updates to the board.
Yeah.
Maybe when you bring it back, you can think about, is that like once every 6 months, once every year, once every 3, what's the right interval that it doesn't become burdensome?
Yep.
But that it gets
Yeah,
calendared.
and the hope would be that it's like something we're managing anyway, and it would just be a quick write it down. And then have a discussion at the board meeting, so I don't think it would represent a ton of effort, but we just don't want to inundate, it's like, yeah, nothing's changed since the last time we talked, right? Yeah, we were thinking quarterly initially, so we can think about that a little bit. Formalize it a little bit.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted.
no, no, that's fine. So there's clarity to move forward.
There is clarity,
Okay.
that needs clarity.
Thank you, and I think we all agree that it's a great first step.
Perfect,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hey. And with that, Michael, you're up with the approval of the chemical contracts.
Morning, Board of Directors, President Wilson. Here today, Operations Manager Mike Peak. Just wanted to go over an annual approval of chemical contracts for FY 27. The agency solicited bids for purchase of hydrated lime, liquid oxygen, methanol, hydrochloric acid, perchloride, and sodium hypochlorite for the upcoming 26-27 fiscal year. Got a breakdown here of the prices for the low bid, or for the lowest respective bids. And the difference, if you look, is about $100,000 from the last fiscal year. Most of these contracts were in a multi-year contract. We plan on going back to a single year because it gives us a little bit more value. The recommendation today is that from management and staff is to approve the award of the bids, procurement of the hydrated lime, liquid oxygen, ethanol, hydrochloric acid, perchloride, sodium hypochlorite, and to the appropriate lowest responsive bidder. Any questions?
Yeah, so on the methanol, it looked like we went with Thatcher, which was 7 cents more cents silver, but if you took that 7 cents and applied it to 203,000 gallons or whatever it was, it's like a $16,000 difference. Is there a reason we chose Thatcher over Univar?
They were the lowest responsive bidder. We had some issues with Univar's bid. It was not as responsive. There was some extra language in the document. And we had basically kick them out.
Okay,
So these
these contracts lock us in for a year,
12 months.
12 months. Any thoughts on what happens over the next 12 months with some of this? I mean, hydrochloric acid is up 150%. This is insane.
We don't use, I mean, it's definitely not one of the higher, cost increases. When you look, it's methanol and sodium
Yeah, I get that.
Sodium hypochlorite because of the amounts that we use.
I mean, I get methanol given the current situation in the Middle East is, I mean, is there a price decline possibility in there? Like if market changes, then we pass along 20% of the savings or anything like that? No.
I mean, we did have a reduction in the liquid oxygen and the ferric chloride. So it just depends on the bidding.
Yeah, no, I get
at the
it.
time.
I'm more worried about timing, but that's fine. You can't time the market, so whatever.
Yeah.
Just a question. Thank you.
Just a regular one, we only have 1 minute for these. Is that pretty common? Is there just very limited numbers?
It is. For these chemicals and for our area. We definitely reach out to everybody who is capable to be able to bring these constituents or these chemicals to us. But a lot of times. Companies won't bid on it.
Do you need approval?
Yes, please.
I need approval.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Aye. Approval is,
Thank you. And this will be July 1st.
I think it's County Blackville.
Well, Scott's gone, I've got a question for the other board members. So like this item, like from my perspective, I would have been fine with this on consent calendar. I don't know if this is not an item specific to this agenda, but I think there's some stuff that's like routine business that could go on our consent calendar that I don't know how the other board members feel about that. We can talk about that at the end of the meeting. It's like director's comments. Yeah.
Morning, board member Scott Williams, service manager. Here's my third board member, Will Prudence, and I'll keep it brief. So with that in mind, kind of next process step, we completed the land exchange last summer with TTAD, picked up 31.98 acres in exchange for some for a portion of our parcel subdivided over around the bend on Jorger. With that said, kind of to get us in operational alignment with our other parcels, the new parcel we received currently sits outside of the town of Truckee limits. And so in order to pursue any further boundary work with this parcel we received, we need to get it into the town of Truckee to simplify lot line adjustments, subdivisions, et cetera. So with that, I included a figure to show just everybody kind of in mind. Currently, it's zoned as a business park in Nevada County. Had conversations with Nevada County LAPCO. They just picked up the LAPCO supervisor, and also had conversations with the town of Truckee. Considering this parcel is not currently developed and there's no one residing on the parcel and it's immediately adjacent to existing town boundaries, it seems a pretty straightforward annexation process. So with that, the next step, and Josh wrapped it up, the resolution is to get a board resolution that allows to move forward with the annexation process, complete the application, pay the minimal fees associated with the application, and also have the town either in their consent agenda or otherwise have separate resolutions in there accepting the parcel to their record. So with that in mind, staff are recommending the approval of resolution 1-2026 for the application for TTS requesting LAPCO for Nevada County to take the proceeding for the annexation of APN 049, 040, 028 into the town. Any questions?
Has there been any conversation with the town about what zoning designation? So the zoning on the property is currently business park in Nevada County. Becomes the town boundary moves to absorb the property. Does the business park zoning carry forward with that, or does this get a different zoning designation?
Great question. The intent is to move forward with public facility zoning to be consistent with the other parcels we own, and additionally would be, if we in future work, that would potentially include a sale, depending on the interested party, also in some of these public facilities. That was communicated to the town, our intent associated with that, and the potential tax ramifications, and there was no communication of concern with at this time.
Yeah, I bring it up for the other board members because, kind of two thoughts with it. One, I think the reason Nevada County is fine with the annexation happening is because they're, us being a public agency, we don't pay property tax. So they're not seeing that they would lose out on any property revenue by shifting the boundary. With a business park zoning district, you know, feasibly, we could sell land off to the private sector that they could develop, you know, whatever on it. I don't think that's our intent. That's not the direction we've been headed. We've been talking about intent being open to selling land to private parties. So what we're talking about is moving the property boundary, but then also modifying the zoning to be a little bit more restrictive than the current zoning is on the property. Where it's pretty wide open in terms of it's any kind of a public agency or public activity that's happening on the property. It's pretty broad in terms of the types of uses that can happen within that category. But it does kind of put a zoning restriction on the property that would be more restrictive as it would relate to potential for sale to private properties. I'm personally fine with it, but I think there's a nuance there that is worth making sure we understand.
Yeah, thank you.
So.
And Scott, I don't know if you even have an idea of this timeframe for this to,
Yeah, Nevada County LAFCO estimated about 4 months from when the
Okay.
application's received, we will process it and complete that. But we also need to go to town, make sure that we get that resolution from them. I'm hoping they'll put on their consent agenda for Director Wilkins' comments, but that'll be up to the town to decide how they'd like to proceed with that if there's a discussion.
okay. Yeah, it seems like a pretty simple.
So approximately 6 months with the town, depending on how soon we can get it into the town's process.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from board? Any questions from public? Seeing none, I'll for a motion to approve.
I would move we approve resolution 1-2026.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we can move on to the, Scott, you're still up. Recommendation to approve the digestive improvement project scope and fee amendment number 1 with Brandon Caldwell.
So I think it's important to start off with this scope and fee amendment with just the discussion background of where we're at. And for me, I'm a visual person, so I like to put a calendar to show and reflect the schedule and where we're looking at today with a look ahead of what we're trying to accomplish with this scope and fee amendment. So just as a walkthrough previously, staff kicked this project off with BC in May of 2024. In the agenda, we signed a contract in March, but due to scheduling, it should kick it off in May 2024. A year later, we completed the basis of design verification for the project. That was required to supplement the previously completed preliminary design performed to fill in some gaps, particularly locating the facility site and planning accordingly. During that period, there was a number of components that were identified, but not further detailed out until we got into the 30 and 60% design accordingly. With that said, as we proceeded into that final design period and phase, there was a number of complications associated with existing equipment and coordinating the tie-ins with those, as well as I previously discussed up here, we're trying to roll out a new skate upgrades project. And so with that, there's a number of components and equipment that will need to be upgraded. And this is phase 1 of that. It's meant to be a pilot project. those components and pieces were not identified during the scoping of this project, as we still didn't have those components identified, which direction we were headed as an agency with that. So that's just kind of particularity I want to point out. So as we kept going through, it was identified in October of 2025 that we received an invoice from BNC related to the project that showed 60% design task at budget. We had not received that deliverable yet. So inevitably, as project manager, I asked for a status update on progress of the design, considering we were at cost. Further discussions revealed that while BC had been proceeding ahead, they failed to identify the amount of additional scope that had been wrapped into the project. We're attempting to try to incorporate it into the overarching budget of the project without getting into a subtask and task-based assessment. That resulted in further talks with BC about the current state of the project and what was required to get the project completed. Negotiations followed that, and we're sitting where we're at. So with that in mind, the agency and up there, it's resulted in us in a situation now where we've been locked in a 60% design deliverable that was intended to be completed through the winter. BC did provide us a 60% deliverable in February for the project. However, there are rework components of it that need to be for this project to move forward. Staff did spend quite a bit of time working through those scope and fee amendments to come to a mutually agreeable rework on that, and that's what's attached as part of this document. That additional fee is approximately $998,000 for that work, and they're here today and present to discuss any items in particular related to that scope and fee amendment. This is calling BC. With that said, yeah, we're at a point right now where recommended action is for us to move forward with this to get the project completed. And I'm hoping to discussing any particularities at this point with you related to the project.
Any questions or comments?
I'm not going first. I'll do the cleanup.
Okay. I think the thing that struck me as I read this attachment and scope of services is in general project management. So it says here, there's a schedule of over 20 months, 20 monthly progress reports, 40 bi-weekly progress meetings, 30 minutes each. This amendment extends the scope of services with an additional 12 months, 12 progress reports, and attendance of 48 weekly progress meetings, i.e. 4 per month for a duration of 30 minutes at the request of the agency. When I go back to attachment C1, I look at, what's that costing us? So that's about, identified around $64,000 more for all these additional meetings, which suggests to me there has been a large breach of trust somewhere here in this process. That we would be willing to ask for more meetings that we are paying for because there's been some kind of trust issue. So that's kind of one of my big observations in all of this. Okay. I made it work.
So a couple things, Scott. One, thanks for in the presentation, providing the original budget. Would have been helpful to have had that in the staff report.
Yes.
Just for future reference. So what I was trying to get my head around, so when we hired Brown and Caldwell a couple years ago, it was for basically taking a project from concept through final design drawings. And and anytime you've got a complicated project in the early phases of design, you learn more about it, and oftentimes learn about unexpected things, usually things that would be more complicated than you thought they were going to be going into a project as opposed to less complicated. I'm curious for projects like this, I'll come back to this specific one, but for future reference, would it potentially more like a two-stage contracting process make more sense where there's an initial contract that carries a project through a conceptual or a preliminary design phase. Where after more information is learned about the project, a lot of the details that you referenced that we learned early in the design process get figured out. Then there's an opportunity for a phase 2 contract, and it does a couple of things. One, it creates a logical breakpoint where if things aren't going well with the selected consultant, you could potentially cut a cord and then move in a different direction. It also provides, in my opinion, protection for the consultant team to not get locked into a contract that has a whole bunch of uncertainty associated with it too soon. So anyway, I think that's a question just in terms of your thoughts for projects like this in the future about how we would go about contracting engineering services. Do you think there's any merit to what I was just describing?
100%. Okay, Wilkin. So I'll talk a little bit. I don't want to say too much, but on this point, from the standpoint that you're 100% correct. And that is something that we had previously done with this project with that preliminary design report from Jacobs. And there was apprehension from the management team at that time when we were putting this project out to basically redo PDR a second time around and be stuck in a situation where we still felt like we had a complete product from them, from that past management group. So that was a big driver behind the perception that we needed to get this project into design and figure out some of these challenges through that phase, knowing there was the risk associated with that cost. But because time was a concern in essence associated with the current state of the boilers in that building, very likely to continue to fail. And we were just reeling from a failure that year where we had done an emergency project associated with a critical tie-in with the earth spoiler. There was a lot of pressure with this project in particular to get out an RFP that explicitly wanted both lumped together. With that said, yes, in future projects, doing a PDR prior to locking in for the final design would be something that would be very prudent for us to do.
Okay, so thanks for that.
That's some context why we did it this way.
Okay, thanks. So then specific to this project, in your presentation, you identified that in the early phases of design, there were some things that we learned about the project being more complicated than anticipated, which then led to additional design work being done by the consultant team. What I was hearing between the lines is maybe they charged off into some of that work, knowing that there was going to be additional scope on the project, but didn't communicate that to us as well as we would have liked.
Yeah,
Am I putting words in your mouth?
I mean, my takeaway with conversations with the previous project manager on the project was they were attempting, as being a new client, for us to service to the best of our ability while keeping the project on the rails in the fee arena. And he genuinely believed, he thought he could keep the project within those boundaries with the additional work that they were doing. And
You said the previous project manager at Brown Caldwell?
That is correct.
Okay, as opposed to internally.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Colin has been reassigned. He is now our project manager. So I mentioned also team restructuring, project manager on this project as well. So to touch on your point, yeah, there was a bit of trust lost after that.
So another question, I talked to Jason about this item before the meeting. So I know there was a lot of conversation and some of it at the board level on whether or not to include the electrical generator on the back end of this project. And so my understanding is that's being scrapped now.
That is correct. Would you like me to go further on that?
Yeah, it'd be helpful. But
Okay.
what I'm curious about two things. One, just we thought it made sense previously, now we don't. Kind of what changed there. But the other thing I'm curious about is how much time and effort we put into that phase of the project that's now being scrapped.
Yep. Okay, so I'll try to keep it brief. Brown and Caldwell, the selection committee team that was used to pick a firm, they Crown Call thought out of the box with an organic ranking cycle unit, which they touched on in that scope and fee amendment. That was a large component of the decision-making process for us we didn't think historically going into that project, we were going to be able to utilize their digester gas in a way that had that payback return. So we were skeptical and we were excited to see that option thought out, even if it during the basis of design verification didn't actually work out, but they were willing to throw that in as part of their overarching scope. That BODV did determine that the organic ranking cycle from a cost perspective was not financially viable due to the maintenance upkeep required for the unit relative to its payback. However, they did identify that if we were able to implement a dual membrane cover, this is like a giant, I think like a service tank kind of that goes over the digester, that it was going to work for us to look at doing a linear generator. But that was not in the scope of the project to push that unit in. The intent was that they were going to do the financials. They did that analysis. We did high strength waste receiving separately that the board authorized us to evaluate potential for future payback in addition with that supplemental digester gas being created. All signs pointed to us doing it. We're up until 60% design. There was a follow-up. So during that 30 to 60% deliverable, Tumwar was also looking at dual membrane covers. And as you all know, we're in a very unique climate up here from a wind and snow loading perspective. And during the detailed design, a secondary review and opinion was brought in by VC to take a deeper dive of the associated risk with that design. And it was identified that the snow loading was of principal concern for us by using that dual membrane cover. That follow-up put us at risk that if we had a catastrophic failure of that dual membrane cover, it would result in the agency having high exposure for utilization of our digester gas in operating our systems. It was too much risk for me to go forward with that assessment. So in alignment with BC's recommendation no longer to proceed forward with that, we pulled it from the project. The ripple effects downstream were that the financials associated with the utilization of digester gas were no longer viable. So that was the sticking point. We lose the cover, we lose our gas control strategy, we lose the ability to make the most beneficial use of our digester gas. It was a hit for the entire team, including myself, as we were excited to present to you. And I kept mentioning we were going to be coming forward, presenting the new generator discussion on financials and look at that to add it into the whole scope of the project, but that further evaluation determined. And there was a minor amount of legwork on both staff and Crown Call was part for those initial studies. I think it was, you told me the number earlier today, I think.
Yeah, I can add on quickly.
Yeah, if you want to jump in and all about that.
Colin Casey with Brown and Caldwell. It's nice to see you guys again and see you guys board members. Last time I was here, I think there's a few new board members since last time. So nice to meet you. Yeah, the linear generator design, it's taken through 60%. It's 20,000 worth of our effort. That's how much we put into it up until 60%. I'd say it still is viable to you guys in the future if you did have gas storage like a dual membrane cover and you started increasing your digester gas production. So it's not, I would say it's beneficial probably not to include in this project right now until you get those other components and get higher digester gas production to make it beneficial. We found with your current digester gas production, we did get additional digester gas data from you. Beginning of the project, we only had 2023 data. Since then, we've gotten 2024 and 2025 data now. So thanks for sending more data to us to evaluate it. We found that your linear generator probably would have sat idle a good time of the year. So, you know, putting in the money and the cost to buy a unit that sits idle at this point didn't make a lot of sense. It is something we could do in the future if you have gas storage and a better gas control system with more digester gas.
And then last question for me, for the moment at least. So with so it's a significant amendment, just shy of $1 million. I can, appreciate that to the extent that there was information learned in the early phases of the design that led to additional complexity in the design effort that is out scope work that, that's part of doing business. What I don't have a good feel for is I know sometimes things can happen internal to the consultant team that are really no fault of the agencies, right? Or not driven by the project, where you go down a path unnecessarily because where, you know, a bunch of time and money gets spent on something that, maybe didn't need to, if there'd been better communication with the client, or, you know, it's easy to spend a lot of money if, you know, billing rates we're dealing with consultant teams, on unproductive work. Do we have any sense as to how, and maybe that's more of a question for the consultant team, as to how much of that we might have at play here?
I can start by my perspective if you'd like, and then try to jump in if you want a fair shake of it. We did see quite a bit of turnover from some of the junior staff members on Colin's team and retrainings. DC did express that they ate those costs internally. And then secondarily, we did negotiate quite lengthy, it was like approximately, what would you say, 4 months or so back and forward to come with this scope and payment amendment from the initial number we saw from them related to some of those concerns and comments associated with the turnover that we were not willing to, I don't know, Jason, do you want to jump in about those negotiations from your perspective, but eat ourselves as it was not felt that the agency should bear the full responsibility and ability for those.
We made every effort we could to get some kind of empirical data that showed that they were eating a fair portion of it, and that we were absorbing really, if it was attributable to something like a junior member going awry, or if it was, you know, poor communication or whatever it was. That was the gist of the majority of negotiations was, we're not super comfortable eating that, you know, this cost or that cost, and it was pretty extensive.
Yeah, when you're dealing with those things after the fact, it's far from exact science. Not to really smooth that out, so.
Yeah.
And I can talk about staffing and our negotiations as well. Our lead electrical engineer had a parent to take care of. He retired early from Brown and Caldwell. He did our original basis of design verification. So right at the 30% design, we lost our lead electrical engineer who left Brown and Caldwell. Our building mechanical lead also, he went to HDR right at around the 30% level. So those are two big design components of our project, electrical and building mechanical. That definitely was a hit. We haven't, as part of this amendment, we're not escalating our rates throughout the entirety of the project. So you won't see a rate increase from us. That's something that we're going to take on. We have building mechanical, any up to speed time that new building mechanical took to get up to speed with the project. We didn't bill any of his time. Some drafting time, we had a junior drafter. Looking back at it, I went to his supervisor and said, hey, Tyler spent 80 hours here. Can you tell me what he did? And he said, hey, I think this is training time for Tyler. I'm not going to bill any of that time. So through the negotiation process, the amendment itself, Brown and Caldwell is taking on about $500,000 worth of fee. So we have negotiated quite a bit and making sure that we're taking responsibility for any new staffing or training time that shouldn't be charged to you guys.
So does that 500 include the staffing, getting people up to speed?
It does, yeah.
So it's got everything in.
And like Jason and Scott mentioned, we've had a few rounds of negotiations, and in the amendment, it does list the additional design items. We do have a breakdown of kind of what each one of those is and what our original fee was and why we reduced it, we're taking on.
And actually, I said last question, last one. So,
Well, I'm not,
what
I haven't even started yet.
I haven't even started.
You've been through, so.
Back to me, yeah. What degree of confidence do we have with this amendment, related to getting the project ready to go out for construction bids as compared to, are there other large areas of uncertainty associated with project scope or design that are still hanging out there that could result in you needing to go back to us again?
I'll give you a chance to respond as well, but I'll respond. I with design teams, and projects, I look at the people assigned to them for my level of confidence that they're able to deliver the work based off their past histories. they've made substantial changes and brought in resources for the revised team that I'll let Colin speak to. They give me the confidence that BC's taking the project, at a different level of seriousness to get it done. And I think for them, this is a sticking point that gives me, and I think to a certain degree, I hope Jason some level of confidence that I do feel that they are positioned better than any other firm to get this project done for us at this kind of price point in time.
Because we're at close to 60% design, so I would think that there shouldn't be a whole lot of additional components to the project that would come up going forward. This is more about refining all the details than figuring out the larger scope, I'm assuming.
That's correct. Colin, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, we've scoped this amendment to include the additional design items that have been identified through final design. So this budget has taken us through final design into bidding. The contract ends at bidding, and then it is a separate contract for engineering services during construction. So, and then like Scott mentioned, we do have very technical staff available. Actually, two of my engineers are here today doing a site walk. Again, they're very good at these type of energy projects, digestion gas utilization projects. They're both what we call internally subject matter experts. They've done a lot of these type of projects. I feel confident the team can finish out this amendment under the scope without additional budget requests. I mean, the only, and I think actually it's helping us, but Corolla is doing the nutrient project. That does, and SCADA also does somewhat impact our project. But I think actually from what I've heard now from Corolla, it'll actually, it'll help our project. I don't think what they're doing is going to add anything on to what we're currently designing.
Okay, that's it for me for now.
Is there a retainage or withholding on the new amendment?
As far as like the contingency goes, or
Yes.
no?
Why not?
We discussed that internally. Jason, do you want to comment on that one?
This needs to be the final dollar figure. BC needs to be able to do that. Sure, this gets done before this. So are you saying a retainer or a contingency?
Whatever you want to call it, but holding back some money at the end.
Okay, yeah, so that's effectively with the design contract, you bill on a net 30 basis. You get paid for the work you've done. And if the work's done, then you.
Okay. All right, so basically we're saying before your write-off, this was a 66% overrun on a contract that was notified late. And then you guys took a third off of that overrun. That's not enough. It needs to be half. I'm sorry, but in professional services, half shouldn't be a problem. So I kindly request an extra $248,000 write-down. And I think you guys should look at that pretty hard. This is completely a problem. I'm not going to say the words that come to mind on project management and accountability and future work and all those things. I think you get it. I don't think a third's enough. Sorry. I'll stop there.
I've got two comments. One, I got baffled reading through it because it sounded like the linear generator was not going to happen, and then you get to page 78. And I think you clarified it for me. There's a bullet point that says the design of a new linear generator system through 60% design only. So we've paid 20,000 approximately for that portion. Is that what I heard earlier?
We have not authorized payment over the approved amounts for the task. But an important point to note here is consultants live in a gray area, and I've been on that side of the table where they try to, for their clients, shelter some of those fees and burdens. In this case, in my opinion, BC overreached and on their end spent money that was not authorized without communicating to us that they did not have budget for that evaluation component. And they are now coming back asking for an additional 21,000 for some of that work that was performed to date that they previously didn't express was work that they needed to be compensated for.
Okay. And then want to thank the rest of the board for their comments and questions. But I sit in Bert's. I couldn't agree more with what Bert said. To take a look at this and to have something that starts out at 2.3 million. Jump 45%. You did the math and what was it?
At 66 gross after the write down,
Right.
4.2%. It's a massive number. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, and from the get-go, we're looking at this project and we know it's gonna be expensive. But we've also got to be responsible for the stakeholders and, I agree with Bert on that. To me, this is, the word that I kept sharing with my wife last night was egregious. That's a heavy duty word. I like using it, but it's a big, big number, so. I would like to see what Bert has said. Let's definitely support that. That's,
Well, so it sounds like we've got at least 2 votes on the board to not approve the contract amendment.
That's correct.
As it stands in front of us.
Mind it for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, I want to see more. It just doesn't seem right to me.
We've got a 4-person board today, so I'm not seeing the votes up here to approve the amendment. I guess, question, Scott. So if the amendment doesn't get approved today, that would, you'd basically be having follow-up conversations with Brown and Caldwell about the work scope and then coming back to us either with a recommendation for an updated amendment, presumably for lower dollar amount. Or I guess if we're not unable to come to a acceptable resolution, then we would potentially be discontinuing further services with Brown and Caldwell and then going through a process to bring in another consultant team to pick up the project as it currently stands and then move it forward. Could you describe for me kind of what that looks like? I'm sure it would extend the project schedule, to go through that effort and bring in another team, get them up to speed with the work that's been done to date. Just kind of give me your general overview of that.
Yeah, so we'd be going, I guess, two parts to that question. Bookends. The first part being assuming the negotiations with BC could not result in an acceptable contract amendment that the board would be willing to approve in this case, and we do go to that next step. It would be discontinuing services at the 60% design stage with BC. We do have a right to all the products that they've produced for us, design, build models, calculations. We request all those packages from them to be able to provide the next consultant an opportunity to pick up where they left off. With that said, we go out looking for services competitively based off of walls for the right firm to come in and step into this process and select a firm who felt confident to do so. With that said, that process typically, to spool a new consultant up that's not familiar with the project would take a few months alone just to get familiar with the materials, to be able to properly scope this, pick it up from the 60%, resubmit, and then do the 90 phase services. And then additionally, I don't have a handle at this time as I have not communicated that option with any firms that get a feel for what their schedule and timeframe would be like to pull resources onto the project from their own teams. But I would anticipate that that timeframe would be in excess of where this project would be at as far as finishing the project out in January. And to that end would likely result in us missing next construction season for getting this out for the work to start. So currently we are one more winter out from a bit set. If we were to get this going soon, at this time the pencil's down, you're at risk of starting work next summer for construction if we delay and go through that process. And to that end as well, I will communicate that in future projects, a scope and fee amendment of this size, portions of its work component should have been identified during the basis of design verification completion That is something that will be forthcoming with Corolla. There will be project components in the scope and fee amendment that will be seen early for the board to review. With that said, the access road component of this project alone, I don't know, Casey, what that amount was. But that cost we would be incurring regardless based off site selection, whether it was that basis of design verification completion or now.
That's one of the new items that was
That
identified.
is correct. Yeah.
The fire department's request to put a road out back here.
Yeah. Site access for constructability as well. Do you have the number offhand for what portion of the work was associated with the road?
The design fee is 252 and we're only asking for 100,000. So that's a new access road to get to your new boiler building.
And then secondarily, I will communicate that the instrumentation and control and P90 related sheets were not identified out of the basis of design, and that was an error and oversight on my part that I accept responsibility for, which is a substantial rework on the E&I sheets. That was driven by us not having a complete set of control narratives needed for the SCADA upgrades component of the project that we were performing. And that was something that was not realized until the project. And that number is a substantial portion of that scope and fee that's being proposed.
Yeah, that just the electrical and SCADA improvements, which Scott mentioned is 827 of our total amendment fees. So our total amendment fees 998, 827 is just the electrical and the SCADA and INC improvements. So that is a substantial part of our work. That was identified by going out in the field and identifying electrical components in the project that needed to be replaced for code compliance reasons in building 32.
Some of those sheets are receipts to incur though and have been requested. So not the entirety of that amount was misidentified by staff, but misidentified by BC during the original 103 sheet count. So it's a split ownership. The cost still needs to be there for us to be able to pay for those sheets, even if they were not identified by BC in the original scoping. So it's a combination split effort. It sounds like I missed them all, but I wanted to communicate. There are some on it that should have been anticipated by BC.
Right, yeah, and that's what we reduced the fee from.
So I was willing, and I think I still am willing to make a motion to approve this budget amendment. My comments at the beginning about trust was that I wanted to place gravity on it. But I do trust that staff has done negotiations over the last few months. Trust their judgment on it. And I do understand from a consultant's perspective how difficult these things are to deal with. So I'm going to throw the motion out there that I would approve.
I've got it. This last thing confused me. So the addition is 998,170. And what was the 820,000? That was for new electrical.
I thought the electrical costs were approximately 190 of the scope previous.
Yeah, combined, so replacement of the existing PLCs in building 32. That's 200. New HVAC controls for building 32 and 39. That was 114. Electrical and INC improvements in building 32. That's replacing lighting to be code compliant within building 32, instruments, field panels, transformers to make the code compliance classification. That's another 200.
So I guess I'll talk, and this is a little bit of the sticking point in between, right? Where DC was told to bring the building up to current modern standards and codes. I think there was a misidentified portion of the work associated with the lighting and the extent of some of those panels and the rework due to their limited knowledge of the project going into it, not being familiar with their facilities, proposing on it. After coming through and doing their detailed dive through that as they got into final design, the recognition that, hey, we missed that to get this building up to code and standard compliance for NFPA 20, there's a series of lighting panels, lights themselves. When you say lighting panels, it's not just the lights, but there's circuits through all of those, right? For those not familiar, and Paul can talk to them, but those components were not recognized when they scoped the project out. Could we make the case and argue that they should have captured that and that was an error on their part in their original proposal and scope and B? Yes, we can, and we can try to push back on some of those costs, but as a former engineering consultant, I do also like to pay consultants for the actual work that's required. And this is a principle where we can push back and tell them that you underestimated the scope and fee of this project. And you need to eat those costs and should have captured that. When we put it out, you know, it was vague. We didn't have some of those detailed information. We can go that way as an agency to business, but the industry is small. And my only caution there is that, you know, it's a negotiation tactic on our part. And when we talk about it, separate session, breakout, how we want to go about paying for the work that needs to occur to get this project done. And if we can't come to negotiations that are acceptable between both parties on this, we will still likely end up paying for that work to be done by another professional. So.
Yeah, you touched on a point just now. I think that it's important for us to be thinking about because, you know, consultants have reputations, clients have reputations too. And if you can develop a reputation as being a bad client, which shows up in costs on future projects. So that's something for us to be aware of. I'm wondering, given the dynamics, if it wouldn't make sense to delay action on this by another month. Provide you, Scott, and the Brown and Caldwell team some time to do a couple of things. One, get back together, talk about the money side of it more. And then also, we're obviously very kind of interested in this, maybe at the higher level of detail than we may typically be at with a contract amendment. But maybe it's twofold. Maybe it's looking again at the amount. We've heard from a couple of board members that they want to see lower numbers, regardless of the situation. But then also, as part of if this comes back to us in June, providing a little more information about what some of the new work is that was identified as the design was proceeding, so that we've got a better understanding for that, and then how that came to be, right? Whether it was something we forgot to ask for in the front end, which happens sometimes, right? There's not faulting anyone for that. Whether it was a new project component that, I think, you know, the fire department asked for a road or, you know, some things like that. So where we could have a better understanding of what some of the baseline assumptions were for the original contract versus what the additional services are that are being requested. And then give us a better sense as to how much of this is basically additional work that was unexpected at the beginning of the project as compared to maybe cost being driven by other things. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know what the other board members.
I think you're absolutely correct. I'm looking at attachment C1. And I think the information column that you were just talking about is in that, but looking at it, I couldn't tell you what 205, you know, it's like the numbers don't make sense. So again, what you said is like, let's see what exactly it was. And it might be 6 items or 7 items. And I would be comfortable with that. I just don't feel comfortable. Catherine, you talked about trust, and that's one of the key things we've got to have on this. And also, you know, I'm not saying anybody did anything malicious, but the way it turned out is not what that should not be the standards we accept. That's my feeling on it. Bert, any final?
I stick to my original statements.
Okay, so I think what we're looking for is what Dan just said. Come back in June. Make it a little more simple for us to look at. And we can hopefully be able to move forward now.
But it may be adding a little bit of detail.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a little clarification question on what level of detail the board's looking for at this stage? Because we break out by tasks and subtasks related to design, but what I'm hearing is broken out the amendment based off of project component list. Is that accurate for each item related to how it impacts design rather than the tasks themselves?
So I'll speak for myself. It's maybe a little more qualitative,
Okay,
in terms of, gee, there's road in the project now that wasn't envisioned previously. We asked for building upgrades but at the time the proposals came in, the engineering teams didn't have a full opportunity to come in and look at the building to know exactly what was involved with that. It's more of that kind of for me,
okay,
it's more of a qualitative discussion as to those types of items, maybe at a higher level as opposed to, I think the detail exists somewhere, right, and so I think, providing that full detail in the background, but maybe with more of a qualitative discussion in the staff report.
okay.
And in the presentation, that's what would be helpful to me. And a lower number would be helpful too. So.
You said it perfectly.
Yeah. Catherine, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a matter of presentation, and I agree, yes. Maybe some of this presentation might be a little clearer or easier for us to understand. But I still feel that staff has done negotiations 3 to 4 months. And I don't like the number. I just also feel like neither does the district staff. And I think that they would have looked for a way to reduce it. I don't like that we're spending an extra $64,000 in weekly meetings. That bothers me.
I can clarify that a little bit.
Let me jump in first on that one. We're doing weekly meetings with teacher removal, and that's really helped with the communication coordination. After 2 weeks on projects of this, level of complicated natures, there's a lot of things they have to spin the layer design that we jump into, and it'll be helpful to have those progress meetings to really stay on top of it. There is a level of trust as well, where it's like 2 weeks goes by and you hope there's been progress made and the needles move, but you don't necessarily see it. But
I understand, but I read in the staff report you asked for it. So
Yes,
if
we
you
did.
want it, I get it. And that's what I said at the very beginning. If you think that's what you really need.
Yeah.
Then I think we should be willing to pay for that. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm fine if you want more explanation and perhaps the transparency, understanding, that's good. But I still think I would be willing to approve the budget.
I guess one final point I'll make too, just to give context, and one way or another, the project's currently sitting at approximately $27 million for construction costs as of now.
The last construction cost estimate at the 60% design level was 32 million, which with this amendment puts us at a 10% construction cost estimate.
Which is a rule of thumb for design fees. I mean, we are anticipating some reductions though with some removal of project components, bring us back down under 30. But
Yeah.
To that end, I would state that looking holistically at the project from a design fee standpoint, if we put it out, knowing the scope now that we're at relative to what it was when we started the project out, this design fee is not leaps and bounds. It does seem like a lot, but that's partially you see the sheet counts grown and the components have grown. And so I do want to state that while I understand the fee is substantial, we also would be paying that same or similar fee if we put it out today. But
Yeah.
once you look at the total project cost.
I think one thing I've noticed on the finance committee is it's bothered me that we're not spending the money, right? If you're not spending the money, you're not making progress on the project. And I'm not fully understanding of how this dovetails in with our other big project, but we're on a timeline here for 2 major projects to get done, be complete, and essentially have a new plant here. And I would like us to be moving the needle on that and moving forward with the project, and that means spending money.
Can I interject? So I know this is a really substantial increase. This is not as substantial as the number that came to us initially. I think Colin kind of alluded to a $500,000 eating they're taking on this. Scott and I are pretty confident that through the negotiation process, we've reached a point where this number here represents legitimate additional complexity to the project. There's very little to none of this dollar figure that is, oops, we screwed up, you need to carry some water. So I don't other than us eliminating elements from the project associated with compliance with NFPA requirements, there isn't a lot of room for us to reduce this dollar figure unless it's gratis on the house. So I don't want this to come off as this is a whoops figure from the perspective of we're paying for work that was performed that was not productive. This is a figure of, well, BNC and the agency staff missed complexity. If there was a mistake, that's what it is. This is complexity that in order to reach the goals of the project needs to happen. Sheet count has gone up substantially and the sheet count, what's the 10,000 per sheet?
That's the general.
General rule of thumb, you saw, we got up by over 100 sheets. So that complexity is gonna be there, no matter what. Scott and I are pretty confident we're at a point that we have seen the dollar figures associated with the losses, because they were there. And we're confident we're absorbing either no or a very minimal amount of that dollar figure. So this dollar figure here represents complexity that was not identified.
Scott, if the action's not approved today and it comes back to us in a month, obviously it sets the schedule back by another month. Any sense as to how likely it is that that's the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of project delivery for next year?
So right now, we're tracking if we were to authorize this, the amendment today to complete design and bid ready in January. Yeah, and I think, looking ahead at the June approval, we were planning an initial kickoff shortly on the tail of this to get the project back going again. And so if that's not occurring, we need to reschedule that time frame. Where I'm going is I think we're looking at a project completion to roll another 30 days past. I don't think there's really any time in the schedule for makeup time to capture this loss. So we'd be looking at late February, early March. There's potential we can still bid it with, a certain portion of the construction captured in the summer next year. But it just really depends on our targeted, and we haven't even started talking strategy for bidding on how much time we're going to bid the project out and get done to that level. But I anticipate, we'd lose a little bit of the summer in there. Yeah, to answer.
Is it you think it's a 2-year project?
I do.
Yeah, 2-year construction period. Yeah. It's a whole new building. Yes, we have.
So the goal is to build as much of the new project elements the first summer as we can and get those started up so that we can start working on the choreograph sequencing with the digester shutdowns. This project's complicated in that ops has to choreograph one digester shutdown at a time. They can't do more than one based off of our loadings. And there's a series of steps in there that really have to trickle through for us to be able to roll the next one and be available to the contractor, because each digester has upgrades related to it with the recirculation systems with the heat exchanger. So those complexities don't allow any shortening of the construction schedule either, to make sure ops can continue to handle our loadings going forward. So really where we're at is it's at risk, but it just depends on how much work we anticipate for the first summer contract.
There is a motion on the table.
Yeah. I'm trying to form a question. So the initial addition would have been, based on what I'm hearing, 1.5 million plus, maybe?
1.55. That was proposed staff.
So the second part is staff feels like the confusion was both our staff and BNC's.
I was emphatic with the previous project manager that I would like to capture any scope and fee amendments early on in the project.
Okay.
I was convinced that they invoiced based off of task level. He gave me the confidence that they could implement the project in a way they could get the design down in that 2.2. That was at that basis of design verification post 3D. Went into that, post that, further details were established that were like, okay, we'll staff, see a need, to incorporate PNIDs so we can ensure that our programming and our PLCs that tie into the SCADA project wasn't known at the time which direction we were going to go, really drove that addition of that work. It was substantial. So for those not familiar, we currently have Siemens PLCs that we talked about at length, and I can jump into Paul. They're at the end of useful life. They're expensive to replace, and we are looking at a full new SCADA platform that we're looking to implement. There is security related concerns related to that system that it now puts it at approximately how old since the last upgrade, Paul?
15 or so years, 15 to 20, depending on which phase of design. Yeah.
To be fair, BC, some of those decisions were wrapped around and related to our platform and PLCs that we're going to implement out of this project were not finalized until towards the end of somewhere between 30% that we were really, and those are big decisions to make because they have huge cost ramifications. Everybody talks about, I think, heavy construction with these projects, but when you get to the E and I and INC, they're becoming huge makeups. We're talking about long lead time items. And so with that, to answer your question, Director Wilson, there is shared ownership on both parts. We did add components to the project post the basis of design, but likewise, there were components that B and C should have asked for additional fee amendment at that time. So it's a shared mutual mistake on both parts on a PM level. I learned on my lessons learned here, we need to be extremely strong-willed with the project manager that even if they think they can absorb those costs, it needs to be, no, we are having this conversation now. It is not acceptable. You're not moving forward with the scope and fee amendment post this point if you guys do not request that. So,
I can appreciate everything you just said, but
Yeah.
this was a surprise. If you were not notified, you weren't told, you were led to believe everything's good. That's not what happened here. Like, that's the reality, right? Projects change, I get that. I totally get it. Yeah, we should pay what we should pay for, but this was completely out of the blue. That's not the way this stuff gets managed, not a $3 million project. I would hope not. That's where I'm at. I mean, I hear everything else here, and you can come back to me with all the analysis that you want to choose. Here's what we wrote off. Here's what we did. Here's the additions, the pluses and minuses. You could do a complete waterfall from where we started to where we are today, and then what got taken care of on the side written off. But surprises aren't okay for these kind of contracts. What if Corollo goes over by 66% on the nutrient revival, whatever we call it? That's gonna be like $10 million. We can't do that.
So after all this discussion, I'm going to second Catherine's motion. And I'll provide some context as to why I did that. I'm just kind of looking at it from a business case moving forward. And I'm hearing there's probably a pretty low likelihood we're going to squeeze much more out of Brown and Caldwell. And I also know that if we delay moving the project forward, we've got construction cost inflation on a $30 million project that's heavily working against us. We might be able to squeeze out another $100,000. I don't know, Yeah. But we've got a lot going on here. So anyway, I'll second Catherine's motion. See what the vote is.
And I want to say that I don't feel good about this at all. But the reality is, as you just said, Dan, do we look at it from, okay, can we squeeze more money out? Well, maybe not, but it's not going to be a lot. But we also need to move forward with it. And I go back to what another thing you said, Catherine, is I do have confidence in our staff. And I absolutely believe that you guys did your best to mitigate the damage. So I think I've changed my mind. And so we've got a motion and a second for
You guys,
I agree with your comments, Bert.
Yeah.
will you take an amendment to cut it by $100,000 and approve that? and get 100 out of it. Not to exceed. That's fine. Look, I get it. It's a vote. Go for it.
So we've got a motion and a second, so I guess we,
In favor?
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Thank you. You can call it, I feel sorry for you, man.
I'm happy to be here and I'd be happy to talk about it more with you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
guess the final comment I'll make for staff is Colin has been involved in this project at a lower level. We have full confidence in him and staff know him and he's been the guy boots on the ground. So.
thank you, Scott.
All right.
That was. And I'll know.
You got to pull out here, Scott.
Yeah. 11:45.
So it's 11.
Yeah, I thought it's 10.
I'll send it.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, that is true.
Are we taking a break or going?
Let's go. Let's power through.
Good morning. We're still at the morning marker. We have not progressed to afternoon yet. But I do have the budget to talk about, so hopefully you brought lunch. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right, this morning, the first item that we're going to talk about is the review and comment on the agency's quarterly financial plan review. This is an item that I brought to the board each quarter for this last fiscal year, and it's in a format that aligns with Table 18 in the current budget. Guess what? It's the last time you're gonna see this chart that looks like Table 8 or 18 in the current budget book. When we get to the budget presentation next, we'll start looking at what the new reports will look like and how we're assessing cash balance. But to bring us back to right now, these quarterly financial projections are based on actuals as of March 31st. And going down the rows, we have our description, Fund 10, Fund 2, Fund 6, and Fund 7, then with our total. We start with what our current balances were of cash. They tie to the cash report that was approved by the Finance Committee. The next line is the projected revenues that I am projecting will come in for the rest of the year. So I'm telling you across this line, that's, I think, $8 million more in cash will come in the door based on historical and experience. Our FY26 projected expenditures for the remainder of the year, I believe will total $10.3 million. And that's made up of that 4.5 in operating and then the remaining balance in capital. I'm going to stop right here for 1 second. Normally behind this chart, there's several pages of detail. In the interest of your time and my typing, that detail is included in the budget report as our projections. So these numbers, you'll have more details in the next report if you'll indulge me that way. The next line takes us to our projected ending fund balance. Your eyes should go right to Fund 6 and see those parentheses that it says we'll run out of money. That's a good thing. It means we're spending money. I'm projecting that we're going to be spending money. We do have a transfer from Fund 7 anticipated. And you will see on this chart specifically for Fund 6, I left us at a negative $500,000. I do know that there was conversation right before this item about maybe there will be more spending, maybe there won't be. So I will go back and redial those projections when we bring it to you for final approval in June. And I will include what that transfer amount would need to be from Fund 10. At the end of the day, we have plenty of money to cover that $500,000 loss in that fund. And I believe that our June 30 cash balances will be about $47.6 million. That does not include any reimbursement to us from our bond proceeds. Remember, the financing authority has $25 million parked and invested over here, right? So probably the last week in June, Michelle and I will be spending an inordinate amount of time with Scott and Jason, making sure that we have all of our capital spending dialed in, so we can do that journal entry to reimburse ourselves, and you'll see our cash go right up. It's exactly what we've been telling the board we were going to do. Now the time has come to do it. So again, in short, I project that we'll end the fiscal year at about $47.6 million with our cash balances, excluding those bond proceeds. And we'll go over the details that make up the projections in the next presentation. So the recommended action before you right now is to review and comment on this quarterly financial plan. Questions or comments?
Questions, comments? Important, from the public? Seeing none, let's.
I'll take an easy one on this one. Thank you. All right, let's talk about the budget where we're gonna talk about some more of those projected details. Before we actually take a look at the numbers, I want to say a few words about the messaging going into the budget. Why does FY 27 matter? What did we do as an agency to make this important? Well, my objective in heading into this and talking with everyone was that we need to strengthen our long-term financial and operational resiliency. You all as a board have taken several steps to do that. We've updated a reserve policy, we issued debt, we have a new fund policy. We're going to be looking at our financials differently throughout FY 27. We're already making that different. We just want to continue on that route. We want to ensure that our investments remain transparent, purposeful, and directly tied to ratepayer benefit. We're spending ratepayer dollars. I've heard the word transparency several times across this board. That's exactly what we want to deliver with this budget. The departments evaluated the workloads. We have lots of studies out there that tell us what our staffing should be. You saw a staffing increase request last fiscal year. You're going to see that we're going to be making a reduction from that in this fiscal year because we've reevaluated what we actually need in our workday, and we're basing it on that, not necessarily what someone told us or a study prior in the past had told us we needed to have. Let's see, what else do I need to talk about this? No. Well, on line with that, we did transition general managers into this budget. And one of his first orders of business for us as department managers was, you have new positions. Let's work to justify that, or let's reevaluate. So that's what resulted in that reevaluation. And there's a slide in a few more minutes that talks specifically about the headcount reduction. We took a look at technology and prioritized it. You're going to hear us investing a lot. I'm going to talk about a SharePoint proof of concept item that IT is interested in doing in this budget. Those are technology things that support what we do every day and help us get our jobs done faster so we can spend more time on those qualitative things. We also wanted to look at budget discipline and ratepayer stewardship, as I mentioned in the beginning. When we're spending the money, does it align with the strategic plan that you all just talked about today and laid out for us and that we worked on? What's the purpose or the why behind this expenditure? How does this benefit the ratepayer? And how will success be measured? I think we've been doing these things all along, but that measurement of success hasn't been as transparent as it needs to be, and this budget will do. We've also talked about the onset of technology that will be coming with the new treatment. So understanding what the staff skill set is and what it isn't to prepare them for what the future will be is very important. As part of the final budget, I did not get it done for this presentation. We'll give you a little more information on the conferences and training and the investments that we're giving into the staffing, because that is something where we bumped the budget up. We haven't been meeting that budget expectation, but the message isn't that we're not training. We're doing it, we're just being more efficient at it. So we want to be able to outline that. So that was the methodology or the thoughts that were going into my mind and that we kicked the budget off with for everyone to work on. You guys ready to talk about the numbers? I'm gonna take it personal, let's leave this one talking about. HR already left, so. That's all right, the team is here. Okay, we'll drop in one reminder. This is the draft budget. It can change based on feedback here. It can change based on me going through and updating projections as actuals come through. A final item will be brought to the June board meeting for approval. So this slide that's before you now should look sort of familiar. It is in the CIP. That's the first place that we introduced it. And this is the look at the overall financial plan. There are a few extra columns right now because we're in a actuals and a projected world. So I'll just quickly walk you across the chart. All the charts that we talk about have this same formatting. First, you have your FY 26 approved budget. The next column is year-to-date actuals as of March 31st. Then you have the projection column. Sometimes there are straight line projection. Sometimes there are straight line projection with a little bit of fiddling, as I call it, talking to the managers and talking to the staff about what we're expecting to spend in the next 30 to 45 days. You have your variance from budget in dollars and a percentage. Sometimes the percent seems sensational. Sometimes you look and you go, oh, that $3,000 was really 300%. Wow. So we wanted you to have that for context. Moving further to the right, when you get to the blue shaded, that's our FY 27 budget request. It includes a variance by percentage from projections. I know that's important to this board because I tried to remove it last year, had to add it back in. And also the variance from the budget. We'll talk on those categories that rise for the level above 10%. I tried to sprinkle in a little bit more detail for those items for you all. I also would like to point out one other item on this chart. If you go down closer to the bottom, you'll see a line that says used from reserves and then going to reserves. And you'll see numbers associated with that. If I'm saying it's used from reserves, so when we started FY 26, I anticipated that we would have to use money from reserves. As it turns out, based on the fabulous year that we're having, there will be positive financial results. So we'll be able to actually put money into our reserves instead of using it. This reserve usage and deposit helps set us up for those future reserve targets that you all approved when you said yes to the reserve policy. One of the very last slides will orient you with how the cash reserve fits into this budget. But I wanted to point that out because it's new. And in the CIP presentation of this, it's above as sources and it's just one line. I wanted to pull it out and give a little bit more definition to that. The other items on this page we look at, net revenues are very important to me as well as debt coverage ratio. We need to maintain our AA credit rating. We need to maintain or bolster our credit worthiness because we're not done issuing debt. As we all know, $25 million was a very small slice to get our feet wet in that market. Before I talk about all of the details that make up these numbers, are there any questions on this first summary page? We will revisit it to wrap up at the end. That in silence, I'll take it. Okay, the next slide looks primarily at revenues. Also, I realize I left off the headers on what all of these charts might be, so I'll make sure to point that out right now. But this is our revenues. The board has an approved ordinance for our service charges. That's your prior approved Prop 218 notice. And then we also did an ordinance for our connection charges. So those were very easy budgets to put in there. We talked to our friends at the counties to try to align that $5.5 million tax revenue budget. Other revenues, temporary discharges, those are a little bit harder to guess, so those budgets stayed flat year over year. Interest income is where you see me be the most uptight that I am as a human being. My husband might disagree with that, but here definitely it worked. The most uptight I'm going to be is with those projections. We've had great success out in the market investing our money. We are going to have higher cash balances as we just talked about, but I did keep that at about a 3% increase. If we get more, it'll be a great story. I'll tell you I was wrong. Questions about revenue before we start talking about expenditures? Okay, on the next slide, you have our operating budget with all of the departments rolled up together. We'll talk about details in a few more slides. But overall, salaries and wages account for year 2 of the class and comp implementation, plus that 2.9% COLA that you all just authorized. And it's offset by a reduction in headcount. The FY 26 budget had 55 FTEs or positions, and now we're down to 49. The next slide will show you the department moves, but it's about $750,000 that was removed to that budget before the second half of class and comp and that COLA. I will pause here. If you look at the bottom total, that 3.38% increase over the budget, if those positions had remained in there, that number would have been closer to 7.5%, and the labor budget would have been almost $1 million. Another note for this, medical premiums assume a 10% increase for the second half of the fiscal year. We took our current year rate. We know what they are right now. They come out right before the beginning of the calendar year. All other benefits assume a 10% increase. And I've already noted that the actuals were as of March 31. Questions on the overall roll-up before we talk about the departments that make this up? Oh, wait, I have one more note that I made for myself. If we're looking at benefits in comparison to labor, at Finance Committee, we had a conversation about the benefits multiplier. Based on this total right here, excluding retiree medical, it's about 38%. So for every labor dollar, there's 38% in benefits associated with it. Make sure I didn't miss any other Finance Committee items.
Yeah.
Oh, one more item I'll point out. Since we pulled out retiree medical expense last year and we take a look at it, and it is a pretty large number comparative to other items in this budget, I wanted to remind you all that we do have a trust that we reimburse ourselves from. That trust is about 90% funded now. We'll talk more about that next month when I bring back the official reimbursement, but we're looking between 250,000 and 400,000 in FY 27 for FY 26 expenditures. There's more to the netting that we'll get into, but that's the number. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that salary and wage decrease. I laid out the departments, the FY 26 position counts, and the FY 27 position count. I see that I called them all the FY 26 position count though. That's what happens when you do this like first thing in the morning on board day. The second bullet point should say FY 27. Love it if I type it really hard. So the administrative department went down by 1 head count. It stays at 20% of our overall staffing. Technical services, easy for me to say, went from a head count of 11 down to 8. So they moved down to 16% of our total head count. The maintenance department went from 17 to 15 and remained at that 31%. Yes, and the operations department, because the total change, they shifted up a little bit, but there was no change to their total head count. I noted overall what that dollar amount would be if we had taken them out, and that our total operating budget would have increased by over 7% if we had left these positions in. But again, that reevaluation that each department did truly decided that these positions were not needed. Questions about the headcount reduction?
Yeah, so are these positions that are currently vacant and not being backfilled?
Correct.
Okay.
And when we get to each department, I'll identify what the actual positions were in each department.
So we're not making a whole bunch of people nervous.
Yeah, I'm sure that I am because I'm talking about the budget and I'm saying numbers, but no, there is no one in these positions that went, oh, I guess I don't have a job in this budget. They're all vacant.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's take a look at the administrative department. Thanks for showing up with the support administrative department. The admin department consists of management, general management, human resources, finance, customer service, and safety. See a lot of missing commas there. Work on that. In the salaries and wages category, the administrative assistants. That was a headcount that was in there. The budget hadn't been added in a couple of years. We added it last year. We decided that based on the efficiencies we can find, we do not need that position. Contractual services were increased to align with county services. We actually pay to be on the tax roll. Certain counties, we pay for them to have a new financial information system. If I can find a way for them to pay for us, I will do that. But we've been overspending in that budget category, and so I wanted to align that with actual spending. The other item that saw an increase for us is professional services. There's a rate study that we're going to have to do this year. The RFPs are in process right now, so budget was added for that. Having a newer safety and administrative compliance administrator on board, I wanted to extend a consultant for him for another 6 months. We had Ron who was filling in. He works at North Tahoe. He's the safety guy for North Tahoe. He was helping fill the vacancy, and then he's been helping Bill kind of catch up with our safety training, put together some plans. So we have an additional 6 months of that. Also added a little bit of money so that we can do an evaluation of our current financial information system and find out which one's better and get in it. You'll hear more about that at Steve. Questions on the admin department? All right. Let's talk about operations. Professional memberships increased to support a department-wide CWEA membership. There had been a smaller amount included, and we realized that they were going over budget slightly this year. So we wanted to add budget for everyone to be able to have that membership. Contractual services assumes a 2.5% increase for sludge disposal and hauling. That was the inflator that was in the contract. Whether we see it get billed through, we'll come to find out. That's what had happened in prior contracts, but we plan for it this year. Also, you approved earlier the chemical contracts. Overall, chemical cost increase or balance with reduced overall usage from the projection standpoint, as well as the FY 27 budget. I took a look quickly while Michael was talking earlier, and it's less polymer budget that we have for this year that offset the increases in the individual chemical usages. And lastly, for supplies, repairs, and maintenance, It assumed a rebuild of the filtration asset in FY twenty-six. As they got into it, they found an alternative and they no longer need that budget. So that's why you saw that reduction there. Questions about operations? Pretty good. We're still rolling in morning. Let's do this. All right, let's talk about technical services. Technical services houses information technology, the lab, as well as engineering. From a salaries and wages standpoint, the 3 positions that were reduced, the engineering technician, a senior engineer, and a lab technician were removed from this overall department budget. Office expenses for FY twenty-six had assumed $100,000 for a cubicle redesign. So you'll see the projections are lower. The budget for next year is also lower because we don't anticipate needing that. There was also about $100,000 reduction overall to the IT software budget. Part of that is offset by an increase in SCADA software budget, and we'll talk about that in another slide. The rest of it was just realigning our expenditures with our current contracts. On the contractual services side for this department, digital scanning was completed this year. You will not see that happen again for another 3 to 5 years as the budget cycle. And professional services was increased to support the permit portal. Before the permit portal was in-house, we built it kind of on the backbones of SharePoint, if you will. And so we have a consultant to help with that. Since it is one of our cash registers, we want to make sure that that stays in action. And this is the proof of concept. There was also money added to the IT budget so that we could kind of jump in a little bit more into SharePoint and find some more efficiency. The proof of concept, I believe, will use contract routing as the test point since it goes through all of our departments. Questions on technical services? All right, home stretch, you guys. Let's take a look at the maintenance department. The maintenance department houses the maintenance team, electrical and instrumentation, which includes SCADA. That was a change for the FY twenty-six budget. SCADA used to be in the IT budget. And also in the maintenance department is the warehouse. This is the department that reduced their headcount. The electrical and instrumentation technician and the CMMS technician positions were removed. And there was a change. From an existing headcount, there will be a maintenance lead position. It's something the department's been piloting this year, and it's been very, very successful. So that was added into the budget. There was an increase to the office expense budget. They're doing some desk expansions, and so they needed to have the budget to support that. Contractual services are for SCADA-related hardware and software. In the IT world, that hardware and software budget lives in office expenses, but here it's in contractual services based on how the contracts are required. Professional services were increased to support a SCADA consultant. And then in the supplies, repairs, and maintenance, there's $190,000 that's been assigned to a general repairs line item. We're very particular about our assets and our ledger. We won't be forever. But we have a 50-year-old plant. We need to limp that 50-year-old plant along until we get to the clean water revitalization project completion. So there's $190,000, $150,000 in maintenance, and $40,000 in E&I to support those items that may break or may not break. Questions about maintenance? Oh, you guys were so close. Okay, let's talk about capital really quick. This will be a quick conversation. Do you know why? Because you already approved the CIP, and guess what? That means you already know what I'm going to tell you for FY '27. But what you can see on this chart is our projections for the FY '26 spending. I did assume that there would be some approvals. So we have about $6 million for the water program. For the TRI program, you have about $1.5 million. And then for the vehicle equipment, we have about $50,000 that we I'm sorry, $50,000 that we anticipate spending. That's on lab equipment that's sitting in there. There is the potential for that $50,000 to need to be rebudgeted based on timing. I know that the lab has been waiting for the WGR results to see if there's going to be a change, to see if we need this piece of equipment or this piece of equipment. I made that simple, don't change it. Kristen made it simple for me. So I assumed we spent it because I may come back and ask to rebudget it. So that's what's happening for 26. On the blue side for 27, there is one anticipated change. If you draw your eye all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a vehicle and equipment program item called GRIT classifier replacement for $350,000. After additional conversation, we're going to revisit that number in the next CIP cycle. We believe right now that it's not an equipment purchase, but it should actually be a project and have a little bit more meat to it. So you will see for the June presentation of this and for final approval, I'll remove that $350,000. And then when we talk CIP in the fall and in the spring, you'll see it come back and we'll figure out where it fits in that. I believe that's the only change from there. Any questions about the capital budget?
I have one.
Sure.
And it's probably for Scott. So the SCADA upgrade project, is that basically a new SCADA system?
Yes and no, that's phase one of the new SCADA system. So there's gonna be, that is the placeholder for the design component of it.
Okay.
So we're still currently scoping that project out, but because there's digestion improvements, nutrient removal, and all the remaining facilities that need to be brought over, this component is really identifying the phasing and the strategy behind that. So because of the risk to the agency, we want to hire effectively a professional consultant familiar in the water wastewater sector with doing SCADA integration work to remove the risk of leaving it to a contractor and then getting 3 completely different systems, trying to coordinate them all into a SCADA platform. So this is like the phase one of that, which is identifying the proper SCADA integration consultant that's going to be working with each of these design consultants. Because we spread the work out between different consultants, we now need to coordinate that with the SCADA related work. So
And my understanding is our current SCADA system is kind of like a home built system.
Paul, you should talk on this one.
So,
Sorry, yeah.
no, we've got multiple years of upgrades, all done internally, using internal staff. Multiple projects using different standards, different programming strategies, things like that have been kept held together by a team that has had to figure it out on the fly, and they've done an excellent job living within a very limited budget. That being said, with all of the changes that are going on with the plant, now is the time to revisit it to figure out a more efficient system, something that's supported from outside consultants and contractors. Because the Siemens system that we use there's a handful of people that can support it.
Yeah.
If in a catastrophic failure, we needed outside help, it would be a challenge to find people to help us. So we need to move away from that. This sets us up for that future plant design. So now is the time.
Can I add to that point too? The PLCs that are existing at the plant are at the end of their useful life too. So we do need to replace those PLCs regardless. But we're trying to keep as many of those existing PLCs that are going to be demoed as part of nutrient removal in place and operating, and only replace PLCs as part of this project that are for facilities that will be sticking around. An example would be the dewatering building where we dewater our cake. Those PLCs need to be replaced. They're coming up on 20 years old, and like a computer, everything has a certain service life. So this project is figuring out the necessary replacements, and industry-wide facilities typically try to standardize around one manufacturer. So this is one of those that legal has given us the blessing to sole source justify around a specific manufacturer. Historically, that was Siemens, but in our industry, the shift and the support is not there for it anymore. So we're at a large risk if we don't do this work. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Some of this was, I apologize for continuing on, but just real quick, we did an assessment previously. You may recall that there was a report that was delivered, the IT SCADA master plan. In that plan, it identified the number of PLCs that we had that were at or beyond their useful life, and some of which are no longer even supported or have firmware updates. So that presents a risk for us, a pretty substantial one, considering that's how we run our plan.
Great, thank you.
So moving forward, have we learned a lesson not to do stuff in-house ourselves?
100%.
Yeah, so we're going to be designing these new SCADA systems around industry standards, industry standard blocks. And so the idea is anyone can come in and troubleshoot off that's had experience working at other facilities, rather than having to get into our PLC code and try to troubleshoot very unique lines of code that no one else has seen anywhere. So we're kind of in a rock and a hard place right now. And so this is the first phase of that, correcting and replacing to modern standards.
Internal staff will continue to support what is designed, but using those standards, those industry standards, and they'll be well-trained in advance as part of this project.
All right, any other capital questions? All right, let's go to reserves. So this is new. This replaces table 18-ish. Table 18, the intent of that was to show you that we have the cash to sustain the numbers that we were asking for. You all approved a reserve policy back in December. And part of that policy is laid out below. So I will not read it for you, but this chart now illustrates that. So I've taken those requirements that say as of July 1 each year, if we want this number, this is the dollar amount that we have to have in our bank. So the bars that you see in both charts represent balances. The line that goes across the chart is our reserve target balance. Now, I look at it for more than just 1 year. We're having a 1-year conversation right now. But I would be a terrible CFO if I didn't give you a 5-year lookout to show you what happens to you saying yes to 27 and how that impacts out through the future years. So in short, when you see this chart, you want to see bars above the line. You see bars above the line. On the capital side, you'll notice that I used 2 colors. That was for effect. The lighter color that's at the top is a restricted balance. Those are our connection charges. That's what we've historically called here Fund 2. I'm going to try really hard to not call it Fund 2 here anymore. I may slip up a little bit, but I want to get us into that conversation where we're looking at operating reserves versus capital reserves, but preserving that capital reserve makeup of restricted and unrestricted. Questions about the presentation of the reserves or the makeup of it? Awesome. All right, let's get back to this. The next slide. It's the same one that I showed you at the beginning. Maybe the next slide. There you go.
Sorry,
Yes,
can we go back?
yeah, go back.
Okay, I knew she was gonna.
You knew.
Okay, so there's a story, right, on that chart, capital reserve chart, right? Because the total capital reserve target goes down. It does, you know, you always expect targets. But you could tell us the story then.
Absolutely. The story for that, the capital reserve is based on looking out 5 years. It takes the current year and out. So when we get to 2029, we're less than 5 years away from clean water revitalization being completed, digestion improvement is completed, those big costly projects are done, and we're just really doing some of that pay-go, but we're slowing back down on our capital projects. Thank you for that. So in truth, you'll see operating will continue to go up. It may flatten down a little bit over time, right? Because we're anticipating just inflationary changes, but that capital reserve is really looking out those next 5 years. And that's why it's important to not just look at FY27 in this chart, but to look at all 5 years. Other questions or comments on this chart? Okay, we're moving to the summary now. All right, we're back to the same information I was starting with. So here's what I wanted to talk about here. In a year where the agency is undertaking the second year of class and comp, that was a substantial increase for us. We are competitive out in the market. We can attract the talent that we want to have at this bar level in this agency now. We were able to do that though, and still maintain a CPI inflator increase in our overall budget. Everyone went and sharpened their pencil. We tightened the purse strings where we needed to, and this is where we need to be. We need to be mindful, thinking back at that chart. Operation stays this way. Capital's got to ramp up before it ramps down. The money has to come from somewhere. We need to have that money to pay debt service, if nothing else. And that is one thing I'll point out on this chart. If you look under uses, the very last use is our debt service. Normally, this was a conversation we had when we looked at Fund 2 and Fund 6. It's going to become its own conversation. And so when you see the budget book next month, there'll actually be a section that talks about it. There's nothing new in debt service, so I didn't add anything here. It's what you all approved when we issued the debt. It's just reminding you that it was approved and what that amount is. So I wanted to point that out here. The other thing that makes me really happy is that number at the bottom. That debt coverage ratio is something that I work really hard to preserve. And that 2.81 sitting there for a FY27 budget in a 50-year-old plant where we had a substantial labor increase, we did a nice job with that. So kudos to the managers and the staff that worked on the budget to put all of this information together. I think those are all of my talking points. Are there any questions before we get to the recommended action? Nothing you want to see that you didn't see? You got it? I'll take it. The action is to review and comment. I feel like we did the review. I have accepted the comments. Thanks for being easier on me than Scott. I'll take that one. Next month, it'll be a little shorter presentation, but it will be more substantial in your packet. And my plea with you is to read all of the pages. I don't always catch all of the typos, but it's going to be a really good narrative. So you do have homework in the next packet, and then I'll make this presentation a little shorter next month.
Since you're asking for, I vote next.
Yes.
So, I was gonna pass on it.
No, not me. Lay it on me.
So, so in the table here.
Yeah.
It shows the revenue as a budget request.
Gotcha.
It's not really, it's a revenue estimate. The budget request is the expenditure side. So, because you asked.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Still gentler on me than Scott. I'll take it. We'll make those changes. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll say thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
We'll be really quick this month. Good morning, board directors, Michael Keith, Operations Department Manager again. All plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month, and we had staff attend some of the CWA conference down in Sacramento. Any questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, if not, we'll move on. Thank you, Mike.
It's short this month, I'll take it.
Okay, Paul, you got a tough part.
Plants up and running, thank you.
Plants up and running.
Lights are on. Bye.
Well, for brevity, not much change as project support for the month. Same projects. A couple of items to note on the plant maintenance activities. You probably see the boiler show up pretty frequently. I just wanted to say, I appreciate the consideration of one of the earlier agenda items. The boilers are a risk. That's one of the key drivers for this project. It's something that, it's an unknown, given their age and condition, they could fail at any time. So we do everything we can to keep them up and running, but it is a risk and it's something that we're very mindful. So thank you. Another note, able to make an offer to escape specialists. So I'm sure you've seen that up there for a while. We got a good candidate and hopefully that works out. We're still going through the process with that candidate and hopefully we end up with a new places. Not much to report on the recorder changes for the month. We've got a few pictures for you there. If you'd like to take a moment to take a look at them, we can flip through them really quick. And yeah, there's one of my technicians now that looks like Tobin over there. Got Jason in the hole. Next page, please. He's working on the one of the LEL devices. One of the newer manifolds that we installed at the wash press for some of the wash solenoids. A couple of staff working on a blind flange and one of our AC units. And not quite as fast as operations, but investigated. Any questions?
No, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Trying to trick my entire time.
All right. Hey there, Ian. Technical Service Department report. Job interviews for the senior engineer or associate assistant engineer are ongoing. We're in a couple candidates on the TTSA parcel. The board just authorized or approved that resolution, so we're good to move forward with that. On digestion improvements, we just spent quite a bit of time discussing the scope of the amendment. So with that stated, we're gonna light fire and get going on that. On Clean Water Revitalization Project, Corolla is continuing to deliver the project on time and in budget related to the preliminary design report components. So we had another DIM meeting just yesterday, design information memorandum for those that want to be reminded of that. So, and we are acutely aware of the strategic planning initiatives associated with those change management strategies. So out of that PDR, there will be discussion point touch points with the board. So I would expect Jason to set that up with everybody. On network upgrades, we did complete the kickoff meeting. That's for that single fiber optic cable project that will get designed with Jacobs. On the laboratory side of things, there was a number of potentially changes to the WDR as it relates to sampling for compliance. So the lab is currently looking at those ramifications for those changes as far as what certified testing methods they need to get compliant with if those changes are accepted by the water board at that September meeting. Additionally, we're looking at the lab information management system enhancements. There are some ripple effects through with the WDR as it relates to reporting requirements, utilizing our LIMS system to output testing results versus right now, I'm looking over at Michael. The system, is it Smarts that we use? I'm trying to remember the water board's mechanism for uploading that information from interface. GeoTracker, that's right. So there's some additional information they want in the monthly reports that we're going to utilize LIMS to provide those for them. We've been dealing with a OVPSD temporary discharge permit and well testing, which has been quite a big thing. Dr. Cox is here. I probably maybe ask a question, but other than that, they're cleaning one of the wells and have a lot of sampling going on with that. And then, as always, continued California Department of Public Health COVID sampling. On the IT side, still working on the domain split. That's quite a big task and undertaking, and there's been a lot of support on the maintenance side with OT and Paul's staff to help support that. We might need to bring in under the IT consultant services a little bit of outside help, though, at this stage, as we've kind of hit some roadblocks that require that help. Sonic wall, firewall, security work, that's kind of a continuing ongoing, just staying up to date with our firewall settings. And then there's a look ahead for Microsoft SharePoint migration work coming this fiscal year, and we have ongoing Microsoft staff training folks. That's all I got. Any questions?
Thank you, Scott.
Hey, can I beat Michael? I can. I won't though. Good morning again. We're still in morning and President Wilson hasn't had a leave. We'll keep it that way. Risk and safety training topic for the month was respiratory training. On the finance side of the house, we did extend an offer and it was accepted for a new account technician 2. He will start on the 8th of June. For building customer service, all of the information for that is in the report. But what I wanted to tote on here was the ongoing public outreach role that Celeste plays. She did a really awesome job in picking out some cool swaggy stuff and coming up with a game that we could play at the Palisades birthday event. I've never seen so many happy kids to throw a little poo-shaped poo emoji into a little toilet like a cornhole game. It was freaking spectacular. So kudos for her, easy for me to say, for coming up with that game and really getting the community involved. It was a really fun day. On the purchasing side, the sewer service rate and connection charge study, as I said, we have the results back. There were 4 bidders. We haven't finished reading through all of the presentations to rate them. I do anticipate holding interviews probably the 1st or 2nd week in June, depending on what we have going on. The contract may not come here until July, just so I could get the budget done. But we weren't planning on starting any activity until after mid-July anyways. And as always, we perform various administrative duties at the GM and the board's pleasure. That's all I got.
Thank you, Lynn.
Right. So I wanted to shout out to the management staff again. While I was gone in the prior week, that is the time frame where we create the board meeting agenda and packet comes together normally, and they handled it all seamlessly. So thank you again to them for that. Also, a special shout out for Liz and Paul. They attended the State of the Community event for the town of Truckee last
Thursday.
last week. And got lots of good comments on that. People were really engaged and interested. So thank you again. So let us out. Yeah, a lot of the same stuff we've been discussing. The area general manager meetings been going well. It's good point for the communication project. Planning workshops for the strategic plan, which we will be doing another quick cleanup on that before presenting it in June. We are doing a bunch of different introductions for the project as far as going out to the public. So like I mentioned, we'll keep you abreast of those things. Other major points, let's see. So Sharon mentioned the Earth Day at the village. That was another thing. This is two things in a row that I would normally go to that I totally skunked on because I was otherwise occupied and Liz again.
I see your MO now. I see
Yeah.
it. I see what's happening.
Yeah, apparently I'm
So bad.
indirectly signing up for things and then not making it to it. So hopefully I don't continue that. So in the next month, we're gonna be doing a lot. So I will make up for it then. I won't ask you to do any of that. Don't worry. And then some more CSDA conference stuff. And that's about all I've got. Questions?
No questions? With that, I just have a last comment, lively discussion on the Brown and Caldwell situation, and I want to thank all the board members for their input. That was a really good beneficial discussion, and these are the type of things we need to have going forward. You know, it's going to be a heavy lift, and I think we need to make sure that we provide the right students. Also, with that,
I have one comment.
oh yes, I'm sorry.
Jason already mentioned it, but I did want to say thank you very much to Liz and for coming to our State of the Town event last Thursday. It was a great presentation. It was just about the right length and a few good jokes, and it went over very well. And so thank you very much for doing
There's some bad jokes too.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there was a lot of dry presentations, so I'll say that.
We were later in the presentation and we were already like an hour
Yeah,
over,
It
so,
was too long.
you know, talking about the poo tube,
You were-
you know, gets a little laughter.
You were
Yeah,
punchy.
a little punchy, yeah. I didn't fall off the stage. We'll take that.
We were the Premier wastewater.
Premier wastewater treatment facility.
And Jason, I just, when I was looking at the article in Moonshine, there was also a thing for a Truckee Reggae Fest. Is that what the summer concert's gonna be down here? Do we know?
The region departments.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. I was gonna say,
They're gonna do the thing out here again. I think they lost money last year.
Yeah, they already canceled it.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
With that, we adjourn. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
I'm not kidding.
I'll put that in your.
Yeah, he's got that, yes. So I hear it.
Yeah, it's just like, just.
Yeah, I think that's actually not bad.
Yeah, you know.
Let's go to lunch now.